guys. Let's start with the first video. Twitter is the most toxic place on the internet. Okay.
Hello guys and gals, me Mutahar, and what do you think is the one website on the internet where you can't have fun whatsoever? Can you go 24 hours without absolutely throwing a giant fit about something? Yes, that site is in fact Twitter. You already guessed it. Now, of course,
is this like really news? I just realized that this was recorded 2 years ago. This is not news. This has been a thing for a while. Like, I don't know, since Twitter existed, it's the place for people to like go woke and whatnot.
Of course, my first mistake was signing on to Twitter and expecting the discourse to be healthy and not poisoned. But, you know, Logan Paul, who I don't really follow on Twitter, I don't really, like, you know, interact or do anything with, you know, he sort of lives to his own devices. I feel like Logan Paul could do things that are a lot worse on the internet compared to what we're about to discuss today. Give that man a flight to Japan in a good old DSLR, and we might see another goddamn apocalypse. Who knows?
No!
Logan is a weird guy, okay?
Let's not.
But when he does something harmless, it gets to a point where Twitter has such an outrageous reaction that I find myself on his side. All right, it's a little wild these days. Okay, goddamn, it's a once in a blue moon scenario. Now, when it comes to arts,
I have to admit though, what he's doing lately with his career has been on spots because he joined WWE and he's like one of the heels, and it so perfectly fits his character. So yeah, I can't wait to see him get destroyed by other wrestlers.
Crafts, all right, TikTok is sort of the hotbed for it. A lot of people are making everything imaginable, you know, cakes, you know, whatever, butt plugs. Logan Paul has made something with old Game Boy colors. All right, let's see what he's done here. Let's quick. This is actually quite juicy.
2 years ago,
so he like gets a bunch of like resin epoxy, and then he basically lays it out. He gets a bunch of these Game Boys and Game Boy colors, dips them in resin, basically, yes, destroying them. And then he aligns them. And last but not least, he basically molds it in this clear, like, resin container.
Art, though.
And all of a sudden, that makes for a cool table, right? Like, god damn. Immediately I wondered, you know, it looks alright, okay? Like, hey, at least he's doing some fun stuff, right?
Yeah.
It is what it is. These are, in fact, Game Boys encased in resin epoxy. Of course, he even lights the table underneath for the RGB, because why not? That's what gamers do.
Like, now, you're not gonna, like, play these, you know? You keep them as a memoir or, you know, something to remember the old days. So this is a great idea.
When I saw this, I was like, huh, you know, it's kind of cool. It's kind of whatever. But then I immediately noticed one thing on Twitter, and that's this quote tweeting. When that quote tweet number is like even over 500, you know that people are trying to attempt a juicy little ratio. You might be like, but Muda, what's there to get mad over here? Well, let me explain something, okay? Because Logan Paul took 15 Game Boys and effectively destroyed them, there's a group of people out there saying, uh-oh, why is it that Logan would destroy 15 perfectly usable Game Boys and prevent anybody from having access to such beautiful hardware? Now, I understand from what I realized, some of these actual Game Boys he used were actually limited editions out there. But for me, immediately when I saw that, I was a little brain damaged, okay? This is a rough estimate of the total sales of just the Game Boy and the Game Boy Color, okay? 118.69 million units. Now, we didn't get no Fiverr scientists to sit down and identify how accurate these numbers are, but I'm going to assume that because of Nintendo selling out these systems and making a crap ton of money during the period, this may not be a wrong estimation. Effectively, most gamers from back in the day probably own a Game Boy Color sitting around. Dude, I probably have my good old-fashioned purple Game Boy Color sitting around with the pirated cartridge of Pokemon Blue and Red. Both the games were on it. It was kind of cool. But that's generally the vibe that I get out of it, okay? That's generally what I see. Now, even if you wanted to get access to a Game Boy or a Game Boy Color, the pricing online isn't exactly as scalpy as you would think, okay? I mean, it is kind of. For instance, this one person selling a professionally restored one for $166 Canadian, okay? So yeah, that's a professionally restored version out there. Of course, if you want to take a gamble, here's one red with no battery cover for $35. That price is what you're about expecting to spend to get your Game Boy or Game Boy Color, alright? Simple as that. I mean, in fact, even games like Pokemon Gold are priced higher than the fucking system itself. And if you really wanted to join the party and get the yellow Pikachu version, which only one kid I ever knew actually owned this, you can spend $99 $93 and get it. So it's not terribly out of cost right now. It's not like it was the most expensive system that you can ever get.
The way that Twitter reacted to him doing that as an art piece is as if he just destroyed hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars into something, you know? So first you would be like, why would you waste the money, you know, when someone else would appreciate it? And second of all, you would feel so bad about him destroying something that is so expensive and unique. But it's not really that bad. Like, it's not that expensive.
Restored.
And he's a
this
millionaire.
Shit isn't
he
a
can
gizmondo,
afford it.
okay? It's not actually rare. This is something, if you
rare,
gave a shit at all, you'd probably already own a Game Boy for the sake of playing it.
Everyone almost,
now, for a lot of people who jump into it, I feel like if it wasn't Logan Paul who did that arts and crafts, there wouldn't be this much negativity about it on the internet. I just absolutely can't understand the amounts of people who are getting this blasted over 15 Game Boys being removed from a pool of over 100 million out there. Now, don't get me wrong, I think every time Logan Paul gets involved in something like this, whether it be this or Pokemon cards, because of his celebrity status, the problem is people jump in, and if it becomes a trend, yeah, that's where you get like artificially increasing prices. No doubt, Logan Paul absolutely screwed the market for things like Pokemon cards, okay? I remember reading a couple days ago that the dude like literally spent about $3 million on like old OG Pokemon cards. And, you know, for some people, when they see that happen, it's like, oh, total investment. But at the end of the day,
some ordinary guy doesn't know about the whole Bitcoin thing with the eggs and stuff. Because that also happened last year. Oh my god, my voice is gone.
I'm gonna look at that arts and crafts TikTok and go, maybe I should just start buying up Game Boy Colors. Maybe they might be worth something these days, boys. Like, I don't think that was ever gonna happen, and I don't think people should have lost their marbles over it. But the discourse is rather interesting. You come across people who are like, but Muda, the hardware isn't that preserved. The hardware, there's dying hardware everywhere. Dude, hardware dies eventually anyways, okay? Yeah. When it comes to most gaming consoles, they're all built to die. I've said this numerous times on my channel, where if you buy yourself like a restored PlayStation 3, an Xbox 360, or even
I actually do own PlayStation 3 and it's working fine. It actually works completely fine.
From this generation or the last generation, like PS4 and Xbox One, those systems, because of the complexity of moving parts inside them, are prone to even more failure than the ones that came before. When you buy Super Nintendos, or you buy Genesis devices, or you buy old PlayStation 1s, or really any old handheld, you are buying hardware that literally has a lifespan attached to it. Even the physical media we buy to preserve has a lifespan attached to it. You buy yourself a Game Boy cartridge, a DS cartridge, it's prone to eventually dying or corroding at some point.
And like, keep in mind, the older the equipment are, the harder for you to even fix them or find anything else to change them. You know, like, it is what it is then. It's so difficult to do that. It's amazing how much the actions of one person broadcast on the internet can have so much influence on a huge number of buying decisions. I mean, would you rather listen to the review of an ordinary person just turning on the camera and talking, or are you gonna listen to like a company or IGN? You know, like, I think I would rather listen to Asmongold and IGN review a game. I don't know. It's something more, especially if you have been following that YouTuber or streamer and you kind of agree with them and you have almost the same views on things. Then I would rather trust that person than trust a company that could be sold.
You buy yourself an old disc, you may end up coming across some form of disc rot. I remember back in the days of the Sega Saturn, it was actually kind of a big deal. But this is the genuine reality of physical media. It's eventually built to die. And so when it comes to preserving hardware or software, the best avenue we have is literally through emulation. I'm going to use PS3 as an example. Eventually, every PS3 will die. There is no official backwards compatibility from Sony regarding the PS3 unless you jump into cloud streaming, which isn't exactly an answer to anything. So when you look at shit like the actual PS3, the fact that we have RPCS3 as an emulator that allows us to play video games from that era
too,
preserved on modern PCs is pretty much like the final zenith of preservation of video games.
Yep.
So when you look at actual Game Boy Colors being used, 15 removed from the pool just for an arts and crafts isn't something to get that bent out of shape over. And if you gave a shit about preservation, well, let me explain something. We have FPGAs. You might be like, what's an FPGA? If you actually wanted to preserve like Game Boys, we actually have them preserved in the shape of analog pocket. Now, this is obviously a much more expensive solution. There are also other avenues you can go into. For instance, like if you get a Mister, they actually have like Game Boy FPGA cores, which allow you to emulate the hardware as actually it's not really even emulation. It literally quite is that hardware, okay? It's got all the same beats. It's got all the same issues. If a game lags on an actual Game Boy Color, it will lag on FPGA hardware. That's how it's designed. And even as far as emulation goes, we literally have cycle-accurate emulation for Game Boy. For instance, this is Same Boy, the emulator you can download that is cycle-accurate. Cycle-accurate literally means that if you wanted to play a game in the exact same beats
No, but listen, you missed the point though. It is a video about how toxic Twitter is because they went, I guess, really mad at him and retweeted him for what he did with the consoles. So yeah, he's talking about Twitter, but he's not really talking about the whole Twitter, but he's talking about a specific example here. But it does give you an idea of what actually goes behind
the original hardware. That means no
Twitter
enhancements, no frame rate enhancements, no optimizations, no nothing. You want the original one-to-one experience, you can download software that literally provides that. And because it's the Game Boy Color, you're never going to have an issue with any device having a problem running this emulator. Because it's such an old device that literally grandma's vibrator could actually run the fucking application. That's how old it is. That's how old the hardware emulating is. So anyways, going back to the whole Logan Paul thing, some of the discourse is rather hilarious. Like, for instance, it's not about being able to play on them. It's about the fact that they're old and worth money. I think this is neat, though. I just see why some people would be upset with it. And then, this is a really good response. The value of shit in the retro game market is completely artificial, and they're no better than scalpers. These things were mass-produced, and there is a shit ton of them out in the wild. Plus, a lot of them look customized, so they're worthless to collectors. Now, do I personally believe that the way that this could have been avoided is a motherfucker could have emptied out the Game Boys and just kept the shells and called it a day?
True.
Sure. But at the end of the day, again, it's 15 Game Boys removed from a pool of about 100 million. It's not going to make a dent in terms of the value of these. It's not going to drive prices up. It's not even
saw this girl who sells like these Game Boys, but artistically she puts in them Pokemon, small figurines of Pokemons, and she makes it like a terrarium or I don't know the word exactly, for a Pokemon. And like it's really artistic and beautiful, and you can put it as a picture or as like it can be framed and stuff. Even Pokeballs as well, she does that. And that is really cool, you know, and that's a cool idea. So I'm thinking, did people go after her for destroying so many Game Boys to make it into art?
To make a penny worth of difference, let's be honest.
I don't know.
But sometimes the comparison is absolutely hilarious. Like, wonder if you would be saying that, if you'd be saying the same, if you used a bunch of working PS5s to make a PS5 table or a GeForce.
But he's like literally saying GeForce 3090. Like, brother, like you cannot mention something that is today very useful and destroy it. You know?
3090 to make a table of them when they are 100%
plus like buying
functional.
A 3090 is so much more expensive.
Here, Chief. All right, if the dude bought like PS5s and like 3090s, and if you found an actual stock worth of them to make a fucking table, I would kind of be blown away. I actually would clap my hands and say, you've probably done what is in fact the most expensively stupid thing I have ever seen. But see, the comparison really isn't even the same at this point. One is a old, dried up piece of hardware from over 2 decades ago, and the other are brand new computer components that not even Jesus Christ can get his hands on, okay? Which I would say becomes the apple and orange comparison. But let's say that Logan did do that. At the end of the day, the dude bought 15 PlayStation 3s and encased them in resin, would probably be me sitting here right now saying how stupidly hilarious that is. But again, a man is entitled to
And I
spend
can
their
understand why we are talking about this when you have millionaires who have like art pieces of a freaking red dot in the middle on a big canvas of nothing for millions on their wall. Okay? Like modern art. And like they have that. And we're talking about this.
money exactly
People
how they
with
want
money
to.
will do
And
whatever
this,
they want to
again, may I
do.
remind
Like,
you, is a little less egregious. So yeah, I kind of wanted to make a video talking about how stupid this entire situation really was, kind of how much I laughed at it and the discourse around it. I kind of wanted to address the L take that I had by actually enjoying something on Twitter. So
it's
again,
art.
I want to apologize to the Twitter space out there. I'm sorry I had
I don't
fun,
agree.
okay? I'm sorry I enjoyed something. And you know, before spending way too much more time talking on this, let's just
I
die it
love his
off right here.
background.
Let's kill the dialogue. If you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike it if you dislike it. I am out.
Okay. That was fun, even though it was 2 years ago. I still think that there is stuff like this happening on Twitter. This is not something that aged badly. You know, it's still a topic that is discussed, and I think that if you have money and you can do whatever you want with your own money and invest it and use it the way you want, I can call it stupid, but at the end of the day, that's not going to change what you're going to do with your own money. Yeah.